I still find it hard to see the examples of terrorist groups that have been defeated gradually in the RAND study. Let's take particularly the Iraq example that Mitchell gave at the end of that. I was involved in that, so I know a little bit about it. I don't think it's true to say that Al-Qaeda in Iraq was defeated. We did, special forces did manage to kill a very large number of them very successfully. What we managed to do there, which we had been urging the Americans to do long before they started doing it, and we actually set up our own talks in Oman with the fake sheikhs that Mitchell talks about in his book, but with some other leaders from the Ba'athist Party and others. We tried to engage with men with blood on their hands, because that's the way we saw them managing to solve the problem. So I would actually say that the Iraq argument illustrates the opposite of what Mitchell wanted to illustrate, which is you do engage with your enemies. These are people who are killing American soldiers, killing British special forces. We talk to them. Why do we talk to them? To try and get to a peaceful settlement. So I just don't see the examples where that really happened, but maybe Mitchell will give us some more examples when he gets up. Totally agree with him that one side is not the audience. I said what it's about is not whether you talk to these people, it's about how you talk to them when you engage them on particular points, how you move forward. That I think is the issue, not talking to them or not talking to them. I just don't think it's right, in any sense, to refuse to talk. Talking is not a present that we're giving them, it's not a reward we're giving them for good behaviour. They're not behaving well. Talking to them is to our advantage rather than theirs. Maybe they don't want to talk to us, but we should be the ones in the position of saying we're willing to talk. It's they who don't want to talk. Now, the other fallacy I think in Mitchell's argument is this notion that Al-Qaeda is not the IRA. Well, the law was the IRA 20 years ago. The IRA was a very vicious terrorist movement. It killed a very large number of people, behaved in the most outrageous ways in their own community as well as other communities. This is something that changes over time. I think it's also a mistake in Mitchell's book to say you have to wait for a Jerry Adams to appear, or indeed for David Trimble. We haven't had David Trimble, there was no way that was in peace in Northern Ireland. You can't sit in every conflict that leads to anywhere else waiting for people like that to turn up. You have to go ahead, start the talks, and hope that such people will appear as leaders of their different groups. So all terrorist groups start with unrealistic demands. The demand by the IRA, the British move out of Northern Ireland, was an unrealistic demand. It was never going to happen when there was a unionist majority in Northern Ireland. The gulf was too wide to engage in negotiations. Over time, they came to understand that's not what they could demand. They could demand something else. They could demand the ability to participate in power sharing. They could demand the use of the Irish language. They could demand equal rights. But it's something very different from the unrealistic demand which they started. I also agree, as I think I said in my opening points, that if the state think you could sit down and resolve the Ireland, it would not be a very productive negotiation. That's why I suggested you start regionally in Al-Qaeda. There are a series of very strong regional groups who have very clear demands that you can address in relation to their own countries. But for the extreme people, you try and sit down and rush back to why you be killed, then they're designed to talk to anyone. Over time, they will, as the security pressure mounts on them in Somalia, they will be ready to talk. And all the practical difficulties that Mitchell mentions are absolutely right. I agree how hard it would be. Terrorist groups are naturally covert organisations. That's why it was an intelligence agent who opened up reliable contact with the IRA. And the Bracer of Qaeda is a very, very pertinent story. The group I work with in Geneva is specialists in contacting leaders of terrorist groups. You have to do it. Sometimes it's a serendipity, like looking in the Stockholm telephone book for a particular name. Sometimes it's contacting the overseas groups of particular organisations. If you then need to find out you are talking to the right people, they've got a cohesive group and they can actually deliver. That's not an argument against people. It's an argument about how you go about it. I don't think I would really accept that I'm a defeatist on this at all. After all, it was the US President who said that we should leave Afghanistan in 2012, which sent the wrong message to Taliban, not the British.
July 2011.
Sorry. So I don't think it's really the British who are defeatist on this. If you send that wrong message to terrorists, then you'll find it incredibly hard to talk to them or negotiate. You need to show you've got some sort of staying power. We said we're leaving Northern Ireland in 3 years' time, and we did that so to negotiate. Why would the IRA even afford to negotiate? So I accept that's a problem, but I don't think the defeatist label really sticks very much to us. I return really to my original point that I don't. The Al-Qaeda doesn't need to overthrow governments. They'd like to, they're not going to. All they need to do is to be able to maintain that grievance, maintain the support they have, maintain the strength of their idea, and keep the military campaign up. The IRA never was going to achieve Brits out of Northern Ireland. It could, however, have the grievance, maintain the support, and keep on fighting. So I return really to ask Mitchell this. In your book, you say, the American people have learned that killing or capturing every terrorist is not an operation possible, politically feasible, or financially affordable. Attempt to do so may become productive. talk to them, negotiate with people straight away. It means you have to be very careful how you engage them. But what is the alternative again? Is there's political grievance. So finding a way of talking to them.
Yeah, I really had hoped that I had been able to persuade all the members of the audience this evening from my point of view. But I realize that perhaps a few of you may still be a bit skeptical, especially because Jonathan is very persuasive and makes some good points. So you may be thinking to yourselves, what makes him so smart? You know, I could be wrong. After all, he is an American, and he did work in the Bush administration. And even though he served for 4 years as the President's Special Envoy to the Northern Ireland peace process, Jonathan didn't mention him even once in his book, Great Hatred Little. Let me explain briefly why I think it's dangerous for us to even consider negotiating with Al-Qaeda today in a little bit more detail. We need to think through how this would work in practice. Any American president from either political party would need to invest the time and political capital methodically preparing the American people for the possibility of our negotiating with Al-Qaeda. This approach is not just highly unlikely, it's unimaginable. And without this preparation, news of our suddenly having a new negotiating partner would send a shockwave through the American people. They would realize that their government officials had been misleading them at best or lying to them at worst. It would be seen as a breach of faith with the families of those who died on 9/11, a breach of faith with the families of our military who have lost their lives fighting Al-Qaeda, and a betrayal of other countries and intelligence services who have allied with us against Al-Qaeda. Impeachment proceedings would almost certainly be brought against the president. The best recent example of the dangers of this approach is the Iran-Contra scandal, which almost cost Ronald Reagan his presidency. The firestorm over our negotiation with Al-Qaeda would dwarf anything we saw with the Iran-Contra scandal. Let me make a final point. Jonathan and I do agree on the distinction between talking and negotiating. And if there's one thing that I think we each would like to read tonight, it's to understand that there's actually a continuum of communications, where formal negotiations sit at one end and covert contacts by intelligence officers, military officials, or even third-party civilians sits at the other. There may be reasons to engage a terrorist group even when the government assesses that the group isn't serious about exploring an end to the conflict. And that also is a point that Jonathan made I agree with. Even when there is no real basis for negotiation, in these cases, engagement may be the smart thing to do because the motive is actually not to engage with the terrorist group, but to undermine it. In other words, in these cases, we're not talking about negotiation, but rather a counterterrorism operation. Skilled intelligence professionals can use these opportunities to gather intelligence and create files on individual terrorists, their personal histories, relationships and rivalries, ambitions, foibles and vulnerabilities. This information can be used to disrupt the operations of the group, turning members against each other. According to a senior MI6 officer referencing the paramilitaries in Northern Ireland, talking to them unsettles them tremendously. Their egos are stroked by your interest, but it causes suspicion and mistrust inside the organization. Information from these engagements can also be used to blackmail or recruit terrorists, to inform on their